Hi, this is Len Edgerly in Sanibel, Florida, and this is the 722nd episode of the Kindle Chronicles podcast on Saturday, February 1st, 2025. This episode contains a conversation that I recorded by Zoom 2 days ago with James McQuivey, Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester Research in Cambridge. Over the years when I was doing the podcast every week, James was my most frequent and most popular guest. He was last on the show about 3 years ago on February 25th, 2022. And that turned out to be just 9 months before the mother of all digital disruptions, OpenAI's release of the ChatGPT AI assistant. As I have been conducting my own experiments with ChatGPT since then, and also with Google's Gemini, Anthropic's Claude, the Humane AI Pin, NotebookLM, and other AI-infused innovations during the past 3 years, I've often wondered what James has been up to. What has he been trying? How does he understand where we are and what's ahead? Those questions and more were answered in our wide-ranging chat, which began by my asking James to give his most provocative opinion regarding the impact of artificial intelligence on the future of humanity. Here's what he had to say.
It's really hard to say that my opinion is provocative in that most people are either already where I am or they're completely the opposite of where I am. So I guess it's only provocative for the people who've decided to not land where I've landed, which is, for me, AI is going to be, generative AI specifically, is going to be like electricity, extremely widespread and used for amazing things by almost everyone. And most of the people using it will barely understand how it works, and that won't matter. And yes, a lot of people will choose to use electricity to do bad things. And that is exactly the way I feel about generative AI in the future. And we just have to watch and see how we compensate for those bad things. And the fact that I think we can is probably one of the most provocative things among certain people that I could say. There's sort of this belief among some people that once generative AI gets some kind of agentic threshold, or some AGI as it's called, that it's out of our control, we can't turn it off, and it takes over the world, and we're living in the Matrix or the Terminator, or you pick your favorite movie. And I don't believe that.
Well, that's an interesting parallel with electricity. Can you think of a point in the development of electricity where bad things were emerging and decisions were made to contain them in a way that had a good effect?
Well, the whole battle over what kind of electricity we would have was one where scare tactics were used to say, oh no, we can't use direct current, we have to use alternating current, because direct current, and those bad people who were promoting it, among whom were Nikola Tesla, they're just dangerous, that you're going to die as a result of that direct current. So we need to use alternating current. And there are good arguments as to why alternating current was the right thing to do at that time. And there are engineers, I'm not one of them, who would tell you that maybe direct current would have been the better solution. But in the end, we made the decision to go alternating current, and here we are today. I don't know that there was ever a moment where people sat down in a room and said, but if we have electricity, people will be able to stay up late at night in secret rooms and plan conspiracies, or it's better if we just don't have electricity so people can't do that. So it's not exactly an apt comparison, because there are lots of people saying specific things that generative AI will do that we should, try to prevent them from doing, or at least keep on our list. And I don't think electricity was used that way. I can say this though, I use the electricity example almost reflexively, because I have a wonderful letter from my wife's great grandmother, who wrote to her sister. This was going to be in the 19 teens, maybe the 20s, I better double check. Her sister came to visit her in the countryside where she lived without electricity. Didn't have running water, and didn't have, a lot of modern amenities living out in the countryside. And her big city sister came to visit her and sort of maybe made her feel bad that she didn't have electricity and she was missing out. And Grace was my wife's great grandmother, thought about this, wrote her sister a letter in the days that followed. We have the letter today, and in the letter she said, I've been thinking about the electricity question, and I just think that it's okay that we don't have electricity. And she said, because if we had it, we would be apt to stay up until 10 and even 11 at night, and that just isn't wise. Which is so sweet when
She
you
was
think
right.
about it. She was
I might be
right.
getting 7 hours of sleep if grace had prevailed.
That is exactly right. It's not that nobody was worried about what electricity would do to their lives. Yeah, Grandma Grace certainly was.
Oh, that's funny. Well, that's it. I want to sort of start out at the big picture, and I'm also very curious how you're using these tools in your daily life when you wake up, and how close are they to electricity in your life? Just because you're using them without stepping back to analyze them on behalf of clients, it's just the way you're living your life in a way dramatically different than 3 years ago before all this came on the scene.
Well, for me, it's a daily habit, but it's not just a question of whether it's daily, it's, how soon in the day. That's probably the question I should start paying attention to. From the moment I wake up, how many minutes or hours transpire before I use it? And I haven't actually stopped to think about that. But this is the kind of question we used to ask people about their mobile phone use, in 2008, 2009. Like, when do you first pull up your phone? And there was a time there for a few years when people were like, well, I have it charging down on the kitchen counter. I'll go down and I'll turn it on, or I'll pull it up. Well, of course, now theday, people have their phones next to their beds typically, and that's the last thing they see before they go to bed, and it's the first thing they see when they wake up, because that's where their alarm clock is. I mean, there's so many things about your mobile phone that are a good precursor for this conversation. When does AI shape, for example, how I might wake up and ask the weather, which right now I ask it of our friend Alexa, and Alexa gives me a general, but not particularly well customized to me, forecast for the day. And I have to pull out my phone and I have to look through the things that matter to me. Well, once I train an AI tool to do that for me, when I wake up and it senses that I've walked in front of the speaker, it'll say to me, hey, good morning. You're usually going to run today, like tomorrow morning, I'll run. Google doesn't remember that. Alexa doesn't remember that. But why wouldn't my AI tool remember that and say, hey, if you're going to run today, just note that you're going to need some gloves because it's a little colder than normal. But there's no ice on the road or whatever. Just some kind of conversational engagement with me. That's not happening right now. But I could imagine that, and I want that. Right now, I'd say I don't use AI unless I'm helping my wife construct something in an email or something for before she heads off to work to teach. I don't use it until I sit down to do my work. So, maybe that's 2-3 hours elapsed before I use it. But then I use it all day long. And then my wife comes home from work and we sit down and talk about things. And maybe like today, we're going to try to build a small AI tool for her to help her students, coach her students on how to write essays in the 4th grade. And this is just common now. I would be surprised if there is a day that goes by that I don't use it, and I have all the advantage as a result.
If you were forced to give up all but one AI tool that you use during the day, the one that is most crucial to the way you work and the way you think, what would you keep if you had to give all the other ones away that you might be testing and trying?
At current functionality, I would stick with ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
And that's partly because I have built a lot of custom GPTs that do things that I want done. And so I can pull it up to translate something that I need translated for a personal project, or to edit something that I need edited. I use the general purpose GPT chat interface all the time too, but there are specific things like this tool that I've helped my wife develop to evaluate students' essays. She copies the text, she puts it in the tool, it goes through and does a quick sense of, did you follow the format that's required by the state? Because we're preparing students for standardized testing, and they have to write essays in that test, and so my wife has to essentially give them advice on how to improve their, ability to write an essay in 40 minutes. So she'll use that tool. So I've customized that. I've built that tool, and the thing is, that's not a huge competitive advantage for ChatGPT down the road. I'll be able to ask any tool to do that for me. I just haven't felt the need to yet. So yeah, but it would be ChatGPT at present.
How tough is it to customize a GPT like that? I've seen the list; they show up on the left when I open ChatGPT. But is that someone a layperson could do, or
Absolutely. It's really quite simple. The question is whether it's more effective than just using the general chat tool. If you know how to structure it properly, and there's a lot of people doing tutorials on this on YouTube, you get more value out of it. Because
I see?
there's some just general weaknesses of most of these GPTs. You and I were discussing this before we hit record, but
Hmm.
they tend to revert to a mean and they tend to be overly accommodating. And so sometimes I need them to pull out a strong point of view. And so I teach my clients this too. And let's say they fielded a qualitative study with some of their customers or their internal employees on a particular initiative. And they just need to quickly get a sense from 300 people what the general range of feelings are. And if you throw those open-ended responses into a GPT and you say, summarize this, you'll get an average-ish summary, the kind of summary that the average person would have come up with looking at all 300 responses. But if you tell the GPT, I want you to tell me what's surprising and
Mm.
unexpected in that data, it will, because it knows it's supposed to look for things that are not consistent with expectations or fall outside of the norm. And it doesn't just report things that are infrequent, statistically infrequent, which is one version of measuring difference, but it'll actually linguistically, without knowing what it's doing, of course, I talk about it
Mhm.
like it has intention, it does not. But it will be able to pull out the surprises. So recently helped a client do this, for example, and said, ask it to identify what surprising and unexpected things. I use both of those words because they slightly land differently, and provide quotes so that you can confirm that the things it tells you it didn't just invent.
Mhm.
And it's because it still will, it still
Mhm.
can, even if you're good
Mhm.
at prompting. So you do that and you get that result, and then you tell it, now tell me all the criticisms of the things you just told me.
Oh.
And it'll go and try to critique those. It'll say, well, okay, I just told you this, but. So you need to ask it for tension. And that's the thing. If you're creating a custom GPT, you need to learn how to ask it to take a stand, to create tension, to be comfortable with taking a side. Because the GPTs have been programmed, well, I say GPTs, the LLMs, whether we're talking Gemini, whether we're talking, the Bing implementation of ChatGPT that Microsoft has in its Copilot products, they're all programmed to just, oh no, maybe I said something wrong. Let me apologize quickly. So when you catch it, for example, in a hallucination, it says something that's not true, and you say, I don't think that's true. Oh, you're so right. I'm so sorry. You're exactly. I should never have said that. And then it'll still, in some cases, continue to say the thing that you just told it was wrong on, and it apologized profusely for. So none of this is perfect, but in those custom GPTs, one of the things you do is you build this kind of thought process where generate this input, now go back, or this output, now go back to that output and analyze it with this in mind. Now go back to that output and analyze it with this in mind. And then I even give it a point of view. I say, imagine that after doing all this analysis, you need to tell a CEO in 500 words or less what they should do with this information, given the way the market is changing or whatever. And
Hmm.
it'll have a point of view. So
Yeah.
you got to give it some grit and some teeth. Otherwise, why even bother creating that GPT? It's just going to give you this bland answer in the first place.
Well, when you mention grit and teeth, I recall that when Elon introduced Grok, which was the AI associated with X, he seemed to have the same critique that everything was kind of anodyne, and if you wanted the real thing, and then you can make Grok do sort of fun mode. It's not only a point of view, but it's just sort of provocative.
Yeah, a little bit of an a-hole, if we're being honest.
Yeah, it's some personal training that he's giving it, perhaps.
Yeah.
But is that in general a difference? And maybe the other question is, there's Claude, there's all these different AIs. Do you interact with them enough individually to expect different kinds or shades of answers to the various LLMs that are out there that people can use?
Yeah, the biggest change right now is that some of the LLMs have incorporated what are called reasoning models faster than others. And the reasoning models they do require a different kind of prompt engineering. The standard GPT-4, for example, you can tell it all of these instructions like I just described. Be
Yeah.
this way, do this way, answer me with this kind of language, high verbosity or low verbosity or whatever. The reasoning models are not designed for that kind of explicit prompt engineering. They're designed to already question themselves within fairly specific parameters. And
Hmm.
so I have not yet built any custom GPTs aligned with the reasoning models because I feel like I still need to understand exactly how to use the reasoning models. The reasoning models that were very, very good at things like research,
Mhm.
where you can point it to a very, very thick PDF full of lots of documents, and you can say, go through all of these documents and tell me what really matters here, and it will reveal its reasoning. That's why they're called reasoning models. They show you the thought processes. They
Mhm.
say, well, first I had to figure out what the biggest summary points in the whole document were. Then I had to figure out how important they were. Then I had to go do some research to figure out whether these things were true or not, validated by external experts or not. So they go through that process. I find that very, very valuable. I think that's where a lot of these things are going to go. But already, though, we're starting to see a difference because I will need that because I'm a researcher. I will want that if I want to parse really complicated social things or business trends. But you don't really need that when you just want to schedule an appointment with a
Mhm.
dentist or to have, I don't even know, reorder something on Amazon. I don't need a reasoning model. Although someone who really, really does this kind of modeling will say to me, well, you kind of do. Because right now, if you go ask these models to do something, they don't realize that they don't know particular parts of how to execute. I found this to be super interesting. I'll ask any one of these. I've done this a lot with Gemini in particular, just because it's convenient. It's integrated into a lot of Google's tools, and so if you're using a a Google Python tool in order to write some Python script, and you ask the GPT to help you make that script, and then it does make the script, and then it doesn't work, and you tell it didn't work, and it says, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and it tries to write it again, and it still doesn't work. The ability for a reasoning model, even in something like that, is specifically for that reason. And that's why a lot of the new code development LLMs are reasoning models because they go through line by line through the code and say, well, I think this is trying to do this, and therefore this must be trying to do this. So,
Hmm.
oh, now I see why it's not working. I mean, it can actually do that in a reasoning model. So maybe I do need a reasoning model to help me reorder something from Amazon. Um, but it doesn't need to be that powerful of a
Right.
reasoning model. And I imagine at some point we'll start talking about Amazon's prospects for this because
Yeah,
they're still behind.
you mentioned Alexa. I can remember you and I used to talk back in the old days about how the Alexa devices were going to be throughout the home, and we just walk through the home and we'd be answering things. And your example of, you wake up and it seems like that's the device that ought to be saying, "Hey, James, I know you're going to be jogging usually, and but Amazon announced it prematurely more than a year ago at a thing I went to in DC. And have they just missed the boat on this, or where do you think poor Alexa is in all of this?"
Let's go back to the question you asked me where you said which one, if you had to pick one, would you use? And I said ChatGPT, but in the back of my mind, it would be, I wish I could be saying, no, I'd rather it be Alexa. Because of that integration, because of the data that Amazon has about the decades worth of purchases I've made, the preferences I have for shipping locations, for different price points that I prefer, different flavors that I prefer when I'm buying granola bars, all of that. The fact that when I go tell, a current device in my home, and I've got just three within earshot of me every time I say that Alexa word, I use it all the time, but it has to be pre-scripted. I have to specifically say, reorder this thing, and then it'll still pop it up on my Amazon Echo Show, and it'll say like, "Did you mean this one that you ordered 3 weeks ago?" Say, "Yes, that's the one I mean. Please reorder." And having a generative AI tool that would figure that out for me is where I think it needs to go, and I want it to go desperately. And their embeddedness in people's lives with all the devices they currently have, I think, is the strongest position. As I think about who has the strongest consumer position, it's them, and it's Google, and basically for the same reasons. You're using both of those companies every day. Google has certain advantages. Amazon has other advantages. Google more in the digital lifestyle. Amazon more in the physical lifestyle. But they're both very, very well positioned. But the fact that there are microphones all over my house that connect to Amazon gives them a huge advantage. But here's the thing: the downside risk of Amazon getting it wrong is huge. When Gemini from Google first came out, and it was awfully embarrassing. You would ask it to do things and it would come back with the most like, oh, I want to make sure no one can sue me or no one can be offended by me. And there were lots of interesting examples that people tried to provoke it into doing, like popes from history, and it would do women of color. And you're like, okay, I get it. You're trying to expose the fact that the model has these built-in flaws, really, because that is a built-in flaw. But really, what was the risk of that from Google's perspective? Huge brand issues, fine, but it didn't accidentally order $1,000 worth of stuff. It didn't like suddenly make your next court filing full of all kinds of garbage. Whereas once you authorize that Alexa agent to do things for you in response to natural conversation, well, now you've got some significant risk. I mean, you and I will remember we've had this conversation where the kids in the household say something and end up ordering $1,000 worth of stuff to the house, and sort of Amazon usually was pretty quick to correct those kinds of things and apologize for it. But that, at least you could say, well, I have to set privacy permissions or child permissions or whatever on my account. That's on me. But once there's an agent that's actually acting in a semi-intelligent way, and I have a named relationship with it, this is the thing that's very, very different, is that once you hear a voice and you associate a name with that voice, you're trusting it in a way that you don't trust ChatGPT, you don't trust Google Gemini or Microsoft Copilot. And so the downside risk is huge on Amazon's side, and I can see why they're being very, very slow. They had technology issues in the very beginning. They were late to the game in the very beginning, and who knows? I mean, we're right now in this situation where just this week the world is absolutely freaking out because a Chinese company has decided to release an LLM that has reasoning capacity, so that's as good as the most recent version of ChatGPT, and cost a few $1,000,000 to make instead of tens of billions of dollars to make, which is what everyone else has been spending. So maybe Amazon's going to say, "Oh, good,
Yeah, we'll have
although
one of
they've spent
those.
billions too." Yeah, but give me more of those. Let's try to use more of those, and who knows? Maybe there would be multiple of those tools that they could test against each other to finally figure out which one to put in James's house. That's, to me, the opportunity is still there. No one else is able to put microphones all over the place in your home to this degree. The only scoop that anyone can do right now, and watch for it because everyone's about to try for it, including Meta, but definitely Samsung and Google, is smart glasses. He says as he grabs the lenses of his glasses, or the frames of his glasses. Smart glasses are going to be the thing in 2025, and they're all going to be AI smart glasses instead of visual overlay smart glasses, which is what people have been trying to do and are still trying to do. We are going to have little tiny displays. We're going to have projection directly onto the surface of your eyeball. All of that's good. But the more important thing that these glasses are going to do is basically put a microphone on your head with a speaker right next to your ear so that you can have a private AI conversation. And that way not need someone to install 6 or 8 Alexa devices around their house the way Amazon has already done. So that, if Google ends up, and with Samsung's help possibly, if they end up walking away with this opportunity because Amazon didn't move fast enough, that would be the way.
That's how they do the end run. Huh. Well, how about Vision Pro? I think in 3 days we come up on the 1-year anniversary of the introduction of Apple Vision Pro. I haven't been able to find any kind of sales estimates. Is the age of spatial computing, is that a thing or not?
So the Apple Vision Pro will go down as probably one of the biggest failures of Apple. I mean, really not since the iPod has Apple had something that's failed this to this degree. I mean, even Apple TV, which people consider was a failure, and I wrote about it when it first came out in 2007, and I said, hey, this thing will sell 1 million units, and then it'll quickly become a brick that sits on people next to people's televisions until Apple redesigns it, right? Which they did, and so they can say, "Oh, we sold way more than 1 million," but you didn't sell more than 1 million of the first version, and that was my forecast back in 2007, and I was right. But this hasn't even sold a
Hmm.
million. Top estimates put it at 500,000, and that's probably 500,000 made, not even 500,000
Hmm.
sold. And the reason is it's just too darn expensive relative to the benefit that you get out of it. I've got right here our listeners can't see this, but you can. I've
The
got
Quest.
my a Meta Quest 3, which costs about
Yeah.
$400, $500 compared to the $3,500 for the Vision Pro. And if you go on eBay, you can find a Vision Pro lightly used for $2,000,
Ouch.
which has just never been the case for an Apple product. Usually you could find, someone who bought it day one and then resells it a week later, with a healthy markup. Now people are reselling them below market price. So now, I'm not taking any satisfaction in that because I think it's a missed opportunity for Apple to have led. The technology was amazing. Don't ever underestimate the power of Apple's technology decisions, but it just doesn't meet the market need. And really, neither does VR. Neither does the headset I just pulled out. VR. I have always said this. I said this in what year was it that Meta, or back then Facebook, bought Oculus, and I went on a live radio interview. I remember this really, really well because I was in a hotel room trying to do this interview, and someone was saying, as a guest on the same show with me, this is going to take over. It's the next thing. Virtual reality is everything. And, they expected me to say something similar. And I said, oh, no, no, absolutely not. I said, virtual reality will be like a trampoline. Everyone will want to jump on one once, and a few people will want to jump on it more than that. But you don't need to do it very frequently to have said that was worth doing and then walk away from it and never do it ever again. Augmented reality, that is what will matter. But there's so much technology that needs to happen before that can occur. And I mentioned Meta before. Meta's smart glass project, they're spending billions on it over in their reality labs at Meta, and they are very upfront about the technology challenges. Before you can put an augmented reality pair of glasses on your head and have it not just be a voice in your ear, not just be a microphone, not just be a tiny little projection that says a few, like, text message came in or something like that. They've got a lot of work to do, but when it happens, it will
Hmm.
take over. It will absolutely replace, I don't know, 20%, 40% of the times you look at your phone. And it will create entirely new reasons to access the information that's coming through your phone, which is probably how it's going to happen. It'll be tethered to your phone for a while, not tethered physically, but
Hmm.
connected to the data and battery in your phone to deliver a lot of value and services to you. So that is going to be an absolutely successful thing. But 2025, we're not even going to really dip our toes in that
Hmm.
water.
Well, I was thinking of a lightning round of different things that I've just been playing with and noticing, and I think it's stretching our friendship to ask you to answer something in 30 seconds when any of these would. I would rather like to hear you talk for 20 minutes on each of these. But if you want to just sort of say thumbs up, thumbs down, anything that comes to mind, I'll just shoot you my lightning round
Okay,
items.
let's do it.
Delphi AI. There's a guy named Tiago Forte who has created a clone of himself based on everything he's blogged. You can go in and ask Tiago questions because it's fed all this stuff in.
This is absolutely going to be one of the most interesting tools that all of us will end up using, even though right now most of us will be absolutely abhorred by the idea. This will be how you will talk to a lot of people in your life. And as macabre as it sounds, this will be the primary way you reflect on and share life experiences about the people who have passed on. You will show your grandkids your parents through tools like this. And you will, just like you show pictures today, No one freaks out when you show a picture of grandma after she's deceased and says, "Why are you showing me that? That's too much like a real person." And in a very few short years, no one will be freaked out when you say, "Let's have a conversation with grandma. She was a wonderful person. I wish you could have met her. Let's have a conversation with her." You'll hear it in her voice, and eventually you will see her face doing it. And you'll be able to say, "Show me grandma at age 30." And you'll be able to comment on what a beautiful woman she was and how you wished you had known her then. I'm telling you, this is going to be absolutely amazing. And there's a big business there, honestly. I should probably quit and go make that happen.
The Humane AI Pin, which I've been wearing since April. Wearables, there's the Claude Note Pin. I'm in danger of having my whole body covered with these things, but where do these little wearables fit into the evolution of this?
It's funny because, as you said, each one of these things, I have my Rabbit AI right there. I have my
Yep.
Claude Pin right here in front of me. And then I don't even remember where I have my other one charging. So most of these wearables are just interesting experiments, just the way a lot of, think about the transition that we had from the computer in the late 1990s to eventually having handheld information, personal information managers. We called them PIMs back then. There was that period where we did, oh my goodness, I'm going to totally forget the name of all of those. Well, we had to learn how to write the language for it. Why can I not remember? I'm drawing a total blank. Do you remember in the year
Hmm.
2000 the little handheld organizers that were all the rage?
Oh,
I've got three of
well,
them.
not the Newton.
No, it was
There
after
was.
Apple Newton. Apple Newton had
Uh-huh.
failed, and it was a touch.
I'm drawing the same
This is
blank. Some part of my body remembers it.
This is crazy that this is because I keep wanting to skip from Newton to BlackBerry, but no, there was something in between. Anyway, a
Yeah.
dedicated device to help you keep track of your calendar that you manually synced with your, PC. Just
I'll
never.
jump in here. The device that neither James nor I could remember was the Palm Pilot, which was introduced in 1996, and it used the graffiti handwriting recognition system to enter data.
But it never took off because the phone was the better place to do that. More convenient, the technology was updating faster. And that's exactly what's going to happen to most of these wearables. You will have something somewhere near your head. So it has access to your voice and your ear, and the ability to project potentially things to you in a pair of glasses. So not that all of us are going to want to wear glasses though. So that's one of the challenges. We'll have earbuds. Think of
Hmm.
different earbuds that have a camera on them so it can kind of see what you're doing from one side of your head. That's probably going to be common as well. But the idea that you need something on your lapel is a temporary experiment in form factor.
NotebookLM, developed by Google with help from Stephen Johnson, sort of the ultimate writer's researcher tool. Any experience with
I
that?
love it. I use it all the time. I think the podcast feature is super fun, even though it's very gimmicky and not super valuable. But I love it, and I think it shows that it was developed by someone who does long-term writing projects. It's just that not a lot of us do long-term writing projects. So other than people like me, I'm not sure that many people will value it.
Hmm. Uh, Elon's robot, Optimus.
Robots are going to happen. They almost have to happen because we will it so. But it really won't matter what it can do physically until we know what it can do mentally. And so it's the AI first,
Hmm.
the AI model first, and then we put it on a body and let the body go in the world and do things for you. That to me is where the robots finally work. I just saw a new robot that's 4'6", I think, that's a lot lighter and a lot more agile than the robots that Musk is promoting, and I think probably less threatening because of their size, and they only weigh 70 pounds, so they don't look as maybe terrifying as a
Hmm.
6 foot tall robot does. And it's $15,000.
Hmm.
Do I want one? No. But put the
Hmm.
right AI on it and let it do tasks like walk my dog, which I don't have. But if I had a dog, I'd let it go walk the dog for sure. And let's see what else it can do once it's paired with the right AI.
Hmm. Real full self driving FSD that's safer than humans. This is another Tesla thing that could spread to other car companies. The bulls on Tesla stock think this is really what you're buying if you're investing in it. But what's your feeling about FSD?
Absolutely going to happen. Just very, very complicated, and so it's going to take longer than anyone imagines. And when it does happen, the sociological changes that will come are probably more interesting to me than the technology itself. What does it mean that our cars can drop us off rather than need to be parked? What does it mean that we don't actually have to own a car if we can just simply order one to swing by and pick us up, or we just order one to go pick up the parcels? I mean, this changes everything. It changes what Uber Eats does. Do we need a human in that car? And Musk knows this, but so do other people. And the technology is actually already quite good, and it's being used on trucks, long haul trucks, which is a business where it's super hard to keep people employed in trucks because it's just not a great lifestyle. So yeah, it already works to a great degree, and it will only continue to get better. And just stay tuned to see how it changes your life.
Hmm. Crypto, Bitcoin hit a new record of $106,000 today. Are you long on BTC?
I'm not. I'm not an expert here, and I do follow my colleagues who do a lot of this work, so they'll have a more informed opinion. I personally try to separate things that go up and down to that degree, suggest that they are more of a psychological phenomenon than they are an actually related to value for the economy or for business. And all I see so far, and the fact that it was driven by the election, the recent spike was driven by the election, suggests that this is just purely a figment, a collective figment of many people's imagination. That doesn't mean that there isn't money to be made by people who want to speculate. You can speculate on anything. But no, this is not the future.
Last wearable health tech. My Apple Watch can now measure my sleep apnea. How big a thing is that, and where is it going to be coming from, do you think?
So I got to say, 10 years ago, I led a wearable technology track session at Le Web, which was a European startup conference that was super fun. I wish that conference were still.
Loic, what was that guy's name? Loic somebody that
Loic
had Web3?
Lemur,
Yeah,
great
it's
guy,
very French.
super
Yeah.
smart, and a billionaire because he was an early investor in things like Facebook. But anyway, the events were super, and that one was good in particular. But I will say, I generally like to think of myself as someone who knows that something's going to take a while before it becomes useful to the average person. I got ahead of myself on wearables, I'll admit. I had the Aura Ring when it first came out. I've done every kind of fitness tracking device. I've done smartwatches that do health, and I love all of that. But it's just way too much effort to keep it all charged and keep it running, read the data. Even when they added AI that would tell you, like, oh, you ate this food and you didn't sleep very well, there's a relationship there. I love that. I just think that's amazing, but it's a lot of effort. And once you kind of figure out a health zone that works for you, you don't need all of that data. And
Yeah.
unless it's being materially useful on a day-to-day basis, I haven't worn my Aura rings. I'm not interested in the new Samsung Ring, even though it looks cool. I haven't touched any of that stuff for a long time. I don't even wear my Fitbit. I have a smartwatch, but I turn off most of the sleep tracking features and those kinds of things. Not because it wouldn't be valuable to some people at some stages in their life. I think it is. I'm just not in that stage of my life. I got all that value, and then I just unplugged from it.
What's one thing we haven't mentioned that you think might have a big impact on our lives in the next 10 years?
I wish there were a way to anticipate how the general vibe shift, to use terminology that is not mine, that everyone talks about, and they usually mean politics when they say that, but how that sort of sociological sweeping change in opinion about all kinds of things in life will affect the way people use new technologies.
Hmm.
Because it will. It's just really hard to know. 10 years from now, was the fact that there was a big, socio-political vibe shift. Will it have changed meaningfully? Will it create new opportunities? I mean, you definitely see the big tech titans showing up at Trump's inauguration thinking this is important to us, so we better be here. And we just saw that Meta has settled with the Department of Justice, or no, with the Trump, sorry, it was not the Department of Justice, with Trump over the ongoing lawsuit about having banned him, about President Trump, from Facebook. So everyone knows that this moment in time is going to matter tremendously to how the technology is allowed to unfold and who might win or who might lose. But none of them really know what that's going to mean. Like, does that
Hmm.
make smart glasses happen faster or slower? Does it make the protections that we need for children in some of these platforms more likely or less likely? It's really hard to say. I mean, right now there's a lot of reactions that are suggesting, like, oh, Institute for Family Studies, for example, has promoted new technologies or new technology controls to help parents help their children develop and thrive emotionally in a admittedly challenging environment. Will that be more likely to occur? And will it be more likely that Instagram will promote that rather than fight it? I mean, right now, it looks like it will be the case. But what does that mean then for Alexa? Does that
Hmm.
accelerate Alexa because Alexa's already a trusted partner in your home, or does it inhibit it because it needs to absolutely ironclad guarantee that it is not going to run afoul of any new regime ideas? I really don't know, and I'm very curious to see how all of that plays out. And then, of course, who knows what future vibe shifts will occur? I can't predict those, but they will also
Mhm.
affect the way the technology unfolds at that point too.
That's fascinating. I hadn't thought of that. The idea that vibes would affect the technology. You tend to think it's the other way around, but that's the sea that the technology swims in, and it's either promotes it or it doesn't.
Yep.
I have been speaking with James McQuivey, Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester Research. Great talking to you again, James. Thanks.
Always a pleasure, Len.
As I was listening to my conversation with James yesterday, getting ready to put it up on the internet for you, I realized that I had not asked him a question about how AI might be built into future versions of the Kindle. And at Amazon's release of the Kindle Scribe in New York, which I attended last year, there were some AI features, including the ability to summarize a handwritten notebook and also to transform handwriting into an attractive, legible font. And those are significant. I've been using them a lot on my Scribe. And then there's a new one coming, I think, soon where you're going to be able to write notes in the margins of Kindle books. But what I have imagined, and I talked briefly about it after the announcement with Kevin Keith, the top Kindle manager at Amazon, is the ability for something like a smart Kindle to provide the kinds of information about a book that these days I'm routinely getting from my AI Pin, sometimes ChatGPT and other AIs, but the AI Pin is the handiest. It's right on my shirt. I'll ask, remind me who this character is again. Or in the case of George Eliot's classic novel Middlemarch, which was published in the late 19th century, sometimes the syntax of a long, flowery literary sentence will just leave me baffled, or there'll be a reference to, some prime minister back in the day that I don't know about. And I'll just ask, who is this guy and what's the author trying to say with this complicated metaphor? And it slows down my reading, but in a way that really makes me happy because I just feel like I can get answers, to whatever I want. So this morning I emailed James and told him I had one more question that I've been kind of thinking about, and I had put in the question as a prompt to ChatGPT, and I shared with James what I had put into ChatGPT. I said, I'm brainstorming a name for a new version of the Amazon Kindle e-reader. I imagine a Kindle that has AI capabilities built in so that a reader could press a button, ask a question about the book he or she is reading, and have the Kindle answer via a built-in speaker. Following the great name of Kindle Scribe for the Kindle, can you, talking to PD ChatGPT, give me some suggestions for an AI-enabled Kindle? Give me a list of 30 possibilities. And I also asked, a couple of the others the same thing. Anyway, the best ones that I came up with were Kindle Sage, kind of like that, Kindle Sapiens, Kindle AI, and then Kindle Cognito. I'm not sure I like that. But so I sent that question off to James, and I said, do you think this would be a promising addition to the Kindle lineup? And do you have any other ideas for a next generation Kindle? He was kind enough to record an answer to that question, and I'll play that for you now.
What an interesting idea. This is definitely something I've long wished for, which is a kind of partner that knows what you're reading, is familiar with the book that you're reading, even where you are in the book, so that you can talk to it about, fiction without getting any spoilers, but you can also talk to this partner in reading about other books that you've read. I've long wished that I had, someone who knew what I had read and could reflect on the questions I've had across books as well. So I definitely think there's an interesting product here for a hardcore reader. This is someone who really has a relationship with books. And I can see this being useful for anyone from someone who does a lot of science reading, a lot of history reading, but obviously someone who's a genre reader, like a mystery or a fantasy reader. Like, you could really dive in and talk about a particular fantasy novel. Brandon Sanderson is on my mind lately because of his recent book release, and think, could I talk with this partner, this Kindle partner? Now, I keep saying partner, even though that's not a good brand name. I wouldn't recommend that as a name for this service. Partly, I want to use the word partner because I'm getting away from the idea that this is an authoritative source, like you had suggested Kindle Sage. I could see seeing, this source of authoritative information. I could see some people responding to it that way, but that's not really what I'm looking for. So just be me, and I can't guarantee that other people wouldn't want that more authoritative. Like, I want the source to go to Kindle Source, Kindle Sage, Kindle, something along those lines. I'm more inclined to go in the direction of someone who's a peer to me, and it could be someone who just happens to have more time and skill to pursue questions. So I'd be like the curator, the Kindle curator. I could see Kindle Maven, which is a little bit of a pro, but not so intimidating that it's authoritative that way. I did check with AI myself, and I came up with some interesting names, but none of them particularly grabbed me. I think the one that was most surprising was Kindle Codex, and that just takes it completely out of people's common understanding of what the word might be. And so you'd be deliberately choosing to brand that idea as, Codex is a compiling of information, but it isn't personalized in the way I was imagining it. Anyway, very interesting idea, and I hope you go make it happen, because I want this.
I really like how James took my idea and developed it. And I think he's right that sort of a partner, an AI enhanced Kindle that is more a partner, kind of a reading buddy. And the name that he came up with that I really like is Kindle Codex. And when I checked with ChatGPT about what's that word just has a resonance with me. It's something about the history of publishing in books. And so what ChatGPT was telling me is that the transition from scrolls to codices, plural of codex, happened during the late Roman Empire, was well underway by the Middle Ages. And it was a bound collection of pages, essentially the earliest form of what we now consider the modern book. And before that, the texts were written on scrolls or other materials. They had to be unrolled, read in sequence. So the innovation of the codex revolutionized the way people accessed and navigated written content. It allowed for quicker referencing, easier transport, more durable storage. So it's one of these kind of transition points in the whole history of books that was very meaningful, and it had something to do with how easy it was to find what was in the book. And I think that an AI built into a Kindle could easily have those kinds of echoes. And I just think it's a cool word, Kindle Codex. It's got the K words. And so I think I'll pass this along to my contacts at Amazon. Maybe Kevin Keith will be interested in it, the guy I love visiting with whenever there's something new in the world of the Kindle. There's some history to this, too, because one of my favorite events or things that happened in my conversations with James was when the Kindle was only in ebook form, and it wasn't a tablet that had like an LCD screen like an iPad and all that. He said, what they really need to do is they need to come out with a tablet, and I think they could call it Kindle Blaze. I think that was the word he picked. And so then when they came out with Kindle Fire, I said, James, you just about nailed it. That's you came up with the name. And then I was telling him they ought to do something like the Kindle Scribe, and I'm sure that name came from places other than my suggestion. But we've got a bit of a thing going here of helping Amazon see their way forward, and once in a while coming up with a cool name. So if sometime in the next 5 years, Amazon comes out with an AI enhanced product called the Kindle Codex, you'll know where it might have got its start. As always, great fun talking to James, and I don't think I'll wait 3 years before the next time I get him on the show. That's it for this episode of the Kindle Chronicles. Thanks for listening.